Welcome to an XM Ranger's Lazy Shell program tutorial. In this video series, I'm going to impart my knowledge of how to use this program to you. This video serves as an introduction to the program itself, some background information, and some things to know before you start. We'll also talk about what to expect from other videos in this series. You may have noticed this Goomba symbol up at the top here. The normal Lazy Shell program uses a picture of a green Lazy Shell here. The version I'm using is the version updated by Yakabom. His version is based on Lazy Shell version 3.19, which was the last stable version made by the original Lazy Shell authors. There was a version 4 in development, but that didn't pan out. But this version is basically the same as version 3.19, but with some corrections and new things added, including some stuff from that unfinished version 4 that did work. For example, some descriptions of event commands have been corrected, some additional NPC properties have been documented, and you can now edit Mario's world map sprite. I'd recommend using this version as it is the most capable and bug-free version of the editor as of the time of this video. I'll include a link to Yakabom's GitHub in the video description where you can download it. But if you are using version 3.19 of Lazy Shell and you can't or won't use Yakabom's version, fear not. About 95% of what we'll cover in these videos will still apply to you. Let's talk about the features on this main menu. Recent ROM files. The last 10 ROMs you've loaded into Lazy Shell will show up on this list. If you need to go back and forth between different ROMs, you can do that here. Reload ROM. Takes the current ROM and essentially refreshes it. If you've changed something in one editor that is referenced in another editor, this will make sure those updates are reflected. Close ROM. Exactly like it says, it unloads the ROM from Lazy Shell. Save ROM. Works like the save button in any other program. It saves the changes you've made. A very important feature. Save ROM as. Again, a feature you'll find in many programs. It lets you save the ROM while choosing the name of the file and where to save it. Settings. Auto-load last used ROM. When this is checked, if you exit out of Lazy Shell and then open it up again, it will automatically load up the last ROM you had in Lazy Shell. Auto-create all editor data. Gonna be honest with you, I don't know what this means. I've played around with this setting on and off and didn't notice anything different. The fact that it's unchecked by default tells me you'll probably be fine without whatever this is supposed to do. Auto-load last used notes database. This program has a notes feature, which we'll talk about in a minute. Checking this option will load up the last used notes database that you used in Lazy Shell. Create backup ROM on save. If this is checked, every time you hit the save button, the program will automatically save a backup copy of the ROM. Create backup ROM on load. Same as the last one, but instead of creating a backup every time you save it, it makes a backup every time you load a ROM. Verify ROM. This might go without saying, but this program is designed to edit Super Mario RPG ROMs and nothing else. With this box checked, the editor will check and make sure that the thing you've loaded into the program is in fact a Super Mario RPG ROM. If it isn't, the program will let you know. Show encryption warnings. Again, I don't know what this is for. I've never seen any kind of encryption warning when using this program. My guess is that it has something to do with the now defunct patching utility this program has. We'll talk more about that later, but again, you can probably leave this setting alone. Remember last loaded indexes. With this checked, the program will keep track of the last thing you were looking at in any given editor. For example, if you open the level editor and look at level 243, then close out of the level editor, and then open it up again, it will open to level 243. And it will do this even if you close out of the program altogether and then reopen it. Backup ROM location. When the program saves backups because you have either one of these two options checked, it will either save the backup copy in the same folder as the loaded ROM, if you have this circle marked, or you can choose where you want the backups to save. Visual theme. This applies to things like the minimize, maximize, and close buttons. The default is that it'll take on the visual appearance of whatever your system uses. For example, I use Windows 11, so these things look like they always do in Windows 11. If you choose standard, the elements take on a bit of an older look. We're talking probably Windows 98. It's purely aesthetic, you do what you like. Patch HTTP server. This is related to the patches button down at the bottom of the program. This feature is now defunct. It doesn't do anything anymore. The creator of the editor used to have a website where he hosted patches created by Lazy Shell, and had a few other things related to the program and to Super Mario RPG hacking in general. You could have used this program to upload patches directly to his server, and to download and apply patches as well, but he has long since abandoned this project. This website does not exist anymore. Default. Default will set everything on the screen back to the program's defaults. Going back up here, import elements from another ROM. You can use this to import specific things that this program can edit from other Super Mario RPG ROMs. For example, if you're working on a project collaboratively, maybe you did the sprite animations while they did the levels. You can use this to import the levels from their ROM into yours. Choose the ROM up here. Something to note is that most editors have separate buttons for importing and exporting features to and from the ROM, so you can import from here, or you can import from the specific editor you're working in. Event history. This window does a good job of explaining what it's for, but the idea is that the program keeps track of what you do, what editors you're using, what element of the editor you're using, etc. This was mainly used for debugging purposes. There used to be a feature where you could report bugs to the creator, and you would submit this event history along with it, so he could reproduce the error and fix it. But again, the creator has long since left this project, so there's nowhere to report this stuff anymore. Show ROM Info. Having this on shows this information here. This shows you some technical information about the ROM file loaded into the editor. As long as you're using the proper Super Mario RPG ROM, you don't need to worry too much about what's here. Besides, if you weren't using the correct ROM, the program would have warned you of that when you tried to load it in. Open Hex Editor. You can use this editor if you want to edit the code of the game directly in hexadecimal. This is something I don't recommend doing unless you really know what you're doing. And even if you do know what you're doing, editing this game outside of the Lazy Shell editors can have unintended consequences, so be careful. Help window. This will ask you if you want to open up the help file as a web page. Website doesn't exist anymore, so you'll have to choose no, which will bring up the program's README file. There are tips and information about the different editors in the README file, so I do suggest reading it. About. Pulls up information about who made the program, the changes made to the program in each subsequent version. In this case, these are the changes that Yakabom has made to version 3.19, and some known bugs. These are things that Yakabom has planned on getting around to, but as of the time of this video, he hasn't yet. Another important feature to talk about are the help tips. There are no help tips on this menu, but you'll see them in the individual editors. Let's pull one up just so you can see what it looks like. We'll talk about the specifics of the Allies menu in another video, but I just want to illustrate what help tips do. If you click this question mark icon, it will pull up the help tips for the various things you can edit in an editor. If you hover over an item, the help tips will tell you more about that item. For example, this tells you that editing Mario's name here in this box changes Mario's name in all menus. Help tips are great if you're not sure what a specific thing in an editor does, but be warned, there aren't help tips for everything. especially not for the newer features. Now down to these buttons down here. Open all editors. It does exactly what it says it does. It opens up every single one of these editors. I prefer to do things one at a time, so I never use that button. These other buttons are pretty self-explanatory. They're like these buttons here up at the top, but for all of the editors at once. Dock editors. By default, each editor opens in its own separate window, but you can instead choose to have them open in this area. Here's an example. We open up the Allies menu. Let's dock it. Now it's part of this main window. Reset clear editor memory. Remember how I said that the program keeps track of what you were last doing in any given editor? Well, you can use this to force the program to unremember it. Let's talk about these two buttons down here. Project. The Project button brings up the Notes area we talked about earlier. From here you can do things like add a title to the project, or other information about it should you so desire. You can also edit the labels on different elements of the editor. For example, let's say you edited event script number 10 to make Mario jump. From here, you can add the index to the element notes, which makes this change in your notes. Then from there, you can click this button here, which will transfer this new label that you made to the editor itself. So if we save our notes, then transfer, we can pull up event scripts. We can see that event number 10 now has this label, make Mario jump. Patches. If you remember from the settings menu, there's a spot to enter a URL for a patch server. Again, this website doesn't exist anymore, so this won't do anything. That's why there is nothing here in this area. Theoretically, someone could create a new patch server to give this button functionality, but I'm not aware of anyone who has done that, so this goes unused. Now, here are some things to know before you start your ROM hack. 1. Use the same version of the editor from start to finish. Speaking from experience, if you start modding in one version of the editor, then try to edit that same file in another version of the editor, you may find that some things will become corrupted in unexpected ways. Some of you may remember that Legend of the Axum Rangers ROM hack I made back in the day when Lazy Shell was still young. I started it in version 2.0. Version 3 came out when it was still in development, so I moved the project to version 3. Result was that I could no longer open up the sprite editor in any version, and certain levels would also crash if I tried to open them in any version. So again, if you're starting a new project, start it in the latest version of the program, and stay there. 2. Keep lots of backups. Lazy Shell is a very sophisticated program that does some incredible things. It's also not perfect. Bugs will happen from time to time when using this program, especially if you're making a full-length game. In my Super Koopa RPG ROM hack, I had one case where I made a level, I finalized it and tested it to make sure it worked and was playable, and then I moved on to do something else, like editing items and sprite animations. Then I came back to that same level in the editor to find that it had somehow become corrupted and I couldn't edit it anymore. I had no idea why, and to this day I still don't. But I learned from previous experience to keep backups, so I was able to restore a backup and I only lost a couple hours progress. It's up to you how often you want to create backups. I don't really have a set point where I make them. I just do one after I feel like I've made some kind of significant progress, like finishing a level, or just working on something for an hour or two. Lazy Shell does have an automatic backup feature, which we already talked about. Feel free to use it. 3. Don't be afraid to look at the original to see how something is done. If you're having trouble making events look smooth, getting the layering right in a level, making animations look clean, whatever, don't be afraid to look at how the original game did it. You can learn a lot about how to make a ROM hack by looking at how things were done in the original and tweaking them to fit your needs. When I'm editing, I'll almost always have two different lazy shell windows open, one for the ROM hack I'm making, and another with an unedited copy of the original game so that I can reference it. 4. Take it slow and test often. Don't try to make an entire game all at once. Do it one step at a time. Test each step out as you go. For example, if you're making a new area of the game, test it one room at a time. First, draw the visual and physical layers of the level, then test them to make sure they work right, and that Mario doesn't go through a wall or something. Then, add the exits to the level. Do they all take you where you want them to go? Then, add the sprites to the level. Test it to make sure the sprites all fit within the level. The Super Nintendo is limited as to how much activity it can display on the screen. If those work, test out the sprite animations and interactions with Mario. Does Mario engage in battle when touching an enemy, or does he walk right through it because you forgot to add an event trigger? The point is, it's much easier to identify problems and fix them when you do it one step at a time. That's it for this introductory video. Future videos will go more in-depth into the specific editors within the program. If you want to be sure to catch those videos, or if you want to support the channel in general, please consider subscribing. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.